You've probably heard people complain that everything today feels upside down, that beauty is suspect, morality is oppressive, and traditions are seen as inherently dangerous. But what if I told you this didn't just happen by accident? What if this cultural shift was engineered slowly, methodically, and philosophically by a group of thinkers who set out to rewrite the values of Western civilization from the ground up? This is the story of the Frankfurt School, a group of Marxist intellectuals who, beginning in the 1920s, launched a full-spectrum attack on Western values. And no, this isn't some conspiracy theory. These were real professors writing real books, shaping real ideologies that now influence art, education, activism, and even government policy. Their core mission was simple but radical: to dismantle the foundations of Western civilization by exposing everything we hold dear: beauty, family, faith, patriotism, as masks for power and oppression. And perhaps the most powerful weapon they used was art. Theodor Adorno, one of the school's central figures, believed that traditional art forms, especially those rooted in European history, were not just outdated or conservative. He saw them as tools of domination. A Beethoven symphony, with its harmony and structure, a subtle way to condition listeners into accepting social order. A painting of a mother and child, a reinforcement of heteronormative family roles. Even the idea of moral storytelling, where good triumphs over evil, is, to Adorno, a lie, a false narrative that hides the complex, often painful contradictions of real life. So what kind of art did he prefer? The kind that disturbs, that confuses, that makes you uncomfortable, a tonal music that lacks resolution, abstract paintings that reject form, novels without plot or moral closure. In Adorno's mind, beauty is not just misleading, it's dangerous, because beauty gives people the false impression that the world is whole and coherent. And if you believe that, you might not feel the need to overthrow the system. But Adorno wasn't alone. Herbert Marcuse, another Frankfurt thinker, took these ideas even further, into the realm of sexuality and personal identity. Drawing heavily on Freud, Marcuse argued that society, especially capitalist society, represses our natural erotic impulses. The traditional nuclear family, according to him, exists not because it's good or natural, but because it keeps people obedient and productive. So how do you rebel against that? You attack the family. You reject the idea that marriage, reproduction, or even gender are meaningful. Marcuse imagined a utopia where people were freed from all these norms, where sexuality became fluid, playful, and non-reproductive, where relationships were not about duty or legacy, but pure pleasure. To him, even the most basic distinction, male and female, was a form of control. True liberation, he said, comes when individuals love themselves, follow their desires, and refuse to perform the roles society expects. And it didn't stop there. The Frankfurt School viewed patriotism, the love of your country, as another form of oppression. National identity creates boundaries. It says some people belong and others don't. It encourages loyalty to a flag, a history, a culture. To the Frankfurt thinkers, that kind of unity is dangerous because it reinforces collective strength. They preferred fragmented identities, groups broken down by race, gender, sexuality, who would be suspicious of any overarching national story. Religion, same story. Christianity in particular was targeted as a tool of patriarchal, moralistic control. It teaches people to submit, to believe in fixed truths, to seek meaning outside themselves. In their worldview, this was another distraction from the fight against oppression. Religion had to go. It was part of the illusion that needed to be dismantled. And here's where it gets really dystopian. By attacking all these institutions, family, nation, faith, beauty, the Frankfurt School created a void. But nature abhors a vacuum. And what fills that void? Control. not the control of fathers, priests, or elders, but of bureaucrats, corporations, and the state. Let's take gender identity, for example. When people are told they can define themselves however they want, that sounds freeing at first. But in practice, it requires massive institutional support. You need the government to recognize your new identity. You need the medical industry to facilitate it. You need laws to punish those who question it. What starts as individual liberation ends as total dependence on external systems. And we see this play out in real time. Just stop oil activists throwing soup on Van Gogh paintings. Why? Because those paintings, that beauty, represent a past they've been taught to hate. Because in the worldview shaped by Adorno and Marcuse, beauty itself is fascist if it doesn't include everything. If something is beautiful, then something else is ugly. If something is normal, then something else is abnormal. And all of that to them is oppression. So what kind of art do they promote? Ugliness, confusion, despair. Marcuse wrote that revolutionary art must expose man's nakedness in the abyss, stripped of tradition, of culture, of community. That, he said, is the path to true freedom, and we've seen what this freedom looks like. In 2025, the National Gallery of Greece exhibited a so-called art piece where the Virgin Mary, one of the holiest figures of Western and Orthodox tradition, was turned into a grotesque caricature. Right next to it, the Greek flag desecrated, torn, humiliated, and presented as conceptual critique. The message was clear: what once was sacred must now be defiled. What once united a people, faith, family, flag, must now be deconstructed in the name of expression. As Roger Scruton said, the sacred and the beautiful go together. When you desecrate one, you destroy the other. In 2025, these acts weren't punished. They were institutionalized, promoted, displayed at City Hall, framed as liberation. But ask yourself, freedom for what? A person with no past, no family, no community, no sense of the sacred is not free. They're isolated, they're rootless, and they're incredibly easy to control. This is the dark genius of the Frankfurt School. They didn't just propose new ideas. They offered a blueprint for dismantling everything Western civilization stands for, and they wrapped it in the language of liberation, diversity, and justice. But if you dig deeper, what you find is not liberation. It's nihilism dressed as progress, destruction masquerading as enlightenment. And perhaps the greatest danger is that this destruction hides behind a smile. As Scruton warned, the left-wing view of culture is that everything valuable is oppressive and everything subversive is noble. But a culture that rejects its own beauty ceases to be a culture at all. That's why understanding the Frankfurt School isn't just academic, it's essential, because their ideas are still alive, echoing through universities, media, activism, and art. And if we want to defend the future, we have to recognize the war that's being waged on the very foundations of our past. Thanks for listening. If this opened your eyes, share it, subscribe, and stay tuned. There's much more to uncover.